Major artists releasing holiday albums is not a new thing. After all, Elvis Presley has the best-selling Christmas album of all time, which was first released in 1957. However, over the past decade, it feels like more and more artists every year follow in Mariah's snowy footsteps and throw their Santa hats into the ring to release a holiday classics compilation. So here's the question: why do pop stars really make Christmas albums? From a certain point of view, it can be hard to see why artists would choose to spend time crafting a holiday project instead of working on their own original material. Let's see. Christmas music is not as exciting to a fanbase as new original songs. It is also well established that the time in between album releases helps feed anticipation from fans. Looking at you, Riri, which could be diminished if there's a holiday album in the middle to help quench a stan's thirst, if only by the smallest of margins. Also, it is well known within the music industry that revenue comes increasingly from touring albums, and I dare any pop diva to do a worldwide Christmas album tour. However, the lesser return on investment might be worth it if you consider the lesser effort that's needed. For a well-established artist, making a Christmas album can be quite simple. Pick a dozen of the most popular holiday classics, record them over a couple days in the studio, have a cozy Christmas photoshoot for the cover, and let the studio handle the rest of the minutiae. You know, finishing the production, designing the packaging and visuals, picking out a release date, and booking a couple of talk show appearances. Compare that to the process of making a full-length original studio album. Artists who write and are deeply involved in the raw material can take months or even years to come up with a worthy set of tracks, as well as writing and scrapping dozens of songs and racking up countless hours of expensive studio rental. Now you might be thinking, "Wow, Roger, that sounds much easier, you're so smart." To which I would reply, "Thanks, I know." But then you would say, "Wait, if recording an album of existing songs is so much easier, then why don't more artists just spit out covers of all kinds of old hit songs and cash in on their proven success? Am I smarter than the music industry?" To which I would say, "No, you're not." There's a reason why this trick works so well only with holiday classics. Holiday classics, much like classic cars, are considered classic because they're old. Really old. Which means most of them are public domain and anyone can perform them without having to split the revenue with the original writers. So anyone, even you, can take a classic for themselves and no one can stop them. And by classic, I mean Christmas classics, not classic cars. Do not try and take a classic car. Or do. I am not your keeper. Now, let's consider longevity. The most successful of studio albums have a shelf life of 2 years at most. After the tour wraps and the last single drops from the charts, it becomes part of an artist's backlog, always there to provide a time capsule of an era to hardcore fans, and to dish out the biggest hit to endless Songs of the Year playlists, but never to own the spotlight again. With very few exceptions. Christmas albums, on the other hand, are seasonal, much like the holiday itself. Who would have thought? So once they're released, they're always there, ready to be dusted off and listened to for about 2 months every year. Sure, most holiday records may not be the most notable or exciting of an artist's discography, and many will never get the attention they originally claimed on their original release year. But the consistent yearly purchases, streams, and radio spins through a long enough time period can be a wise strategy for artists looking to invest in the continued revenue of their catalog. Also, there's always a chance of hitting the jackpot and creating a true rarity in the world of holiday music: a new Christmas classic. Christmas classics are a very unusual breed of hits. Sure, some of them are born as undeniable hits from the very first year of release. Such is the case of Wham's Last Christmas, which charted at number 2 for 5 weeks in the UK singles chart in 1984. However, many a modern Christmas classic seem to need time to grow a following. It should probably go without mentioning that Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You took 25 years of consistent yearly attention to reach the number 1 spot on the Billboard charts. Also, trends indicate that this is only the first of a new crop of Christmas hits to emerge instead of an anomaly. Take Santa Tell Me by Ariana Grande. In almost every single subsequent year, the track has charted higher than the previous one on Spotify's global charts. If the trend holds steady, the song could join Mariah on the upper echelons of the Billboard 100 and cement itself as another inescapable staple of the season. This trend also highlights another reason why I believe many holiday classics take time to build up their reputation. It is my opinion that there is a clear divide in people's minds between what they consider an unquestionable Christmas classic versus what they think of as just a song about Christmas. This divide is defined by whether the song was a fact of the season in their formative childhood years. Therefore, any original Christmas song released after the first decade of their lifetime is much harder to consider a classic, for they remember a time when the track wasn't around, and thus doesn't bring the same kind of comfort and nostalgia that a true holiday classic does for them. Applying that theory to Santa Tell Me, the song was released in 2014, which means there are now 8-year-olds who have heard this song every year of their lives, and will continue to as they propel it to bigger yearly success, eventually cementing it as a classic for everyone. Now, let's consider the way holiday music consumption has shifted over the last decade. Before, playing some holiday tunes meant either listening to the radio or digging out the Christmas albums from your music library and playing them. Nowadays, both options are still available, obviously, but streaming adds a very important third one to the mix: playlists. In this case, the most critical ones are the handful of holiday music playlists that are specifically curated and pushed by the services themselves to feed listeners' hunger for a cheery, Christmassy background noise that will drown out their intrusive thoughts. After all, Christmas music is an experience that is often not heavily curated by the listener. There are millions of people that don't whittle down their Christmas music consumption right to the album they want. Have you ever said something like, "Alexis, play some Christmas music"? Well, in that case, you didn't indicate which song, which album, or even which playlist to play. Instead, you trusted your smart speaker and your streaming service to pick the collection of Christmas tracks with the widest of appeals to accompany you in your festivities. By the way, yes, I did use the incorrect activation name for your benefit. You're welcome. But now you might think, well, what's the big deal? It's kinda like radio. You just turn it on and forget about it. And to that, I say no, they're not. They're far more powerful than any single radio station. As I said, they're really just a couple dozen key playlists that get pushed out and promoted worldwide by the major streaming services. And don't just take my word for it. Xavier Jernigan, the head of cultural partnerships at Spotify, has talked about how they develop what they call the Happy Holidays Hub, a space they push with their curated holiday playlists, and that in 2017, demand for Christmas music had such a spike starting on November 1st that they had to push the release of the hub by several weeks, when the original plan was to launch on Thanksgiving. Therefore, a single well-placed holiday track on the right playlist can generate massive revenues and worldwide reach for the artists lucky or savvy enough to land on them. For example, on the second week of December 2018, 4 of the 7 most listened to playlists on the entire streaming service were holiday playlists suggested by the Happy Holidays Hub. So after all, even if streaming generates pitiful income with every stream, the combined power of the world streaming the same few hundred holiday tracks is worth $177 million a year in the United States alone, according to Billboard. And speaking of streaming, let's consider another way it has impacted the record industry. In the olden days, direct revenue from music came primarily through sales. So once a Christmas album was purchased, it could be played ad nauseum for years to come, without generating more income for the artist. This doesn't mean that these kinds of records didn't have the cyclical income-generating nature that we've discussed. These albums continued selling truckloads of copies every single year to new fans, to people who were moving out of their family home and wanted their own copy, and above all, as gifts. Think, what do you get your annoying in-laws who you don't know very well? Elvis's Christmas album seems harmless enough and seasonally appropriate, right? However, this is not the case anymore. For all the previous reasons, holiday albums are still great sellers compared to the state of the rest of the music industry, but even they have declined proportionally in their yearly sales. So streaming has to pick up the burden, and that system is a completely different beast. Streaming an album once generates orders of magnitude less revenue than outright purchasing it. Therefore, the industry has to rely on compelling constant streams which eventually add up to more substantial earnings. Let's imagine you're a huge Meghan Trainor fan. From January to October, you constantly listen to all her albums, so they account for an important percentage of your total listening hours. However, come November and December, you switch up your listening habits, and now a big part of your streaming sessions consists of holiday tunes. This would mean that the time you listen to Meghan gets reduced, creating a dip in her consistent revenue. But this doesn't have to be the case. In 2020, she released her Christmas album, A Very Trainer Christmas. So now, every November you can jump right over from listening to her regular stuff to her holiday collection, and the consistent revenue stream, pun intended, does not get affected, or even potentially increases during these months, depending on the relative popularity of her Christmas music to the rest of her catalog. Another reason why streaming has impacted the release of Christmas albums is that these services, much like our social media platforms, rely on recency to recommend things to us. Have you noticed how some artists now release deluxe versions of albums weeks or even months after the original drop? How about those EPs that repackage a few of the songs off of the album at a time and show up over the following weeks after the full product? Well, these strategies are the musical equivalent of reposting a viral TikTok after the interest dies down, in hopes of getting more engagement out of the same clip. These automatic recommendation systems pick up the new versions as entirely new content and recommend them to listeners in their new release personalized playlists, like Spotify's Release Radar or Apple Music's New Music Mix. It doesn't matter that, at best, these releases contain just a handful of new songs, and at worst, they're just reshuffled tracks. Well, with modern Christmas albums, a version of this strategy is picking up. Let's take Sia's Every Day's Christmas as an example. The album was released on 2017 with 10 tracks and a bonus one in Japan. On 2018, a deluxe edition was released, this time with 13 tracks, 2 new ones and the formerly exclusive Japanese track. On 2021, a new version, now subtitled The Snowman Deluxe Edition, was released, this time with 16 tracks, the 13 previous ones, plus 2 new ones and a slowed-down remix of Snowman. On 2022, the Snowman Deluxe Edition was reissued, now with 20 tracks, the 16 previous ones plus 3 new ones and another remix of Snowman, this one sped up. So this single album has received 3 further updates over the past 5 years like it's an iPhone, and it has doubled its length from 10 tracks to 20. Sia could have saved all these new Christmas songs and just released a second full-length album by this point. But instead, doing these smaller frequent reissues serves multiple purposes. First, it keeps her biggest fans fed with some new music and encourages them to re-listen to the whole album, because of course the new songs are the last ones on the track list. Second, it reminds her more casual fans that she has a holiday album that they can play over the following weeks. And third, it increases the chances of new listeners coming in and discovering any or all of the songs, because her personalized suggestions might pick up any out of the constantly growing track list. Also, keeping the album fresh in people's minds increases the chances of the songs being used in social media formats like TikTok or Instagram Reels, which can also be a goldmine for a song. This happened to the song Snowman in 2020, which was the catalyst for the album getting that new subtitle and there being 2 remixed versions on the track list. All this time I've been talking about big artists releasing Christmas albums, but I haven't really given any examples except for the few I've mentioned in passing. So let's fix that. The biggest pop stars don't really seem inclined to release full Christmas projects. Let's take Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande for example. They're 2 of the biggest names in the music industry today. Both have expressed a love of Christmas music and both have holiday tracks in their catalog. However, they're all singles or EPs at best, positioned more as gifts to fans or fun moments, instead of becoming full holiday eras in their discographies. This is evident even in the covers of these projects, which are either entirely digital creations or repurposed existing photos instead of a professional holiday photoshoot image that a larger project would likely call for. All this, to be fair, makes sense. As I've said, releasing a Christmas studio album is not the most exciting or lucrative of career moves in the short term, at a time when every single one of their moves is carefully considered to launch their presence higher into the public consciousness, or at least to maintain the status they've so carefully crafted. That is not to say that an extremely popular artist cannot release a holiday collection during a prominent time of their career. After all, Under the Mistletoe is only Justin Bieber's second studio album, though it could be argued that, in this case, this move was made as one more way to cash in on his enormous popularity as best as his management could, before it was settled if his success would continue or if his fan base would quickly move on. Now, let's consider a few notable artists who have released full holiday albums in the last few years. I call to the candy cane stand Carrie Underwood, Kelly Clarkson, and Gwen Stefani. All 3 of them have had lengthy turns in the spotlight, having at least close to 20 years of trajectory. Also, all 3 of them are associated with reality show music competitions, the first 2 having won early seasons of American Idol, and the latter 2 having coached over 10 seasons of The Voice combined. All this means that all 3 of them have had the time and the positioning to increase their name recognition and connection to a very wide age bracket. This wide appeal makes them ideal candidates for releasing very popular Christmas albums. Sure, in a given household they might not be anyone's favorites, but they are well known and liked enough that no one will veto their albums during family gatherings. So artists seem more inclined to do full Christmas projects during periods of their career where there isn't too much attention or pressure on them to deliver constant chart-topping material. They take this time to diversify their discographies with a seasonal project that will, above all, be a gift to themselves as the yearly royalties keep rolling in. But here's the kicker. I was very careful when wording this line you heard a few minutes ago. However, over the past decade, it feels like more and more artists every year follow in Mariah's snowy footsteps and throw their Santa hats into the ring to release a holiday classics compilation. Because even though I feel like more and more artists are releasing Christmas albums with every passing year, the data has decided to rudely state otherwise. A 2021 study by Jessica Misrani for The Guardian shows that the peak years of artists actually releasing holiday albums was from the 90s to the mid-2000s, with over 200 Christmas albums of any kind released every year. After that point, the number of albums heavily dropped to around 50 to 100 every year. Now, I don't have any evidence on why this sudden drop happened, but I can make an educated guess. Around that time, the mid-2000s, was when we saw the shift to digital music consumption. First with digital purchases and then streaming. This created much easier access for listeners to practically any song their heart desired. And, as we've discussed, Christmas music is a very nostalgic and consistent presence in our lives. So we, as consumers, gravitated heavily towards the biggest classics. The iconic, classic, original renditions of the holiday hits. And so, digital music and the streaming market became a double-edged sword for artists looking to position Christmas music. Sure, if they manage to land a hit, the benefits are huge and lasting, but if not, their album will fall out of rotation after a few years, while their 7 decades old competition outlasts them for another 7 decades. I mean, what other songs from like the 50s get prime placement on the biggest, most streamed playlists on the world? And what other decades-old song chart consistently a few weeks every single year, now that streaming influences these hits charts? So, an important portion of artists became more wary of this competition and decided to focus their efforts elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that we won't have a few brave enough artists every year to give us some new holiday cheer among the sea of true and tried holiday classics. So, tell me, what's your favorite Christmas album? Do you gravitate more toward the classics, or do you search for new ones every single year? If you like this video, please remember to like it and just gently caress that subscribe button, like the gentle lover I know you are. Up next, you can watch this video right here where I talk about the crazy, super original way that Katy Perry promoted one of her songs. Happy holidays!